So, during your time with the IFBB and you're competing, did you ever train at Gold's Gym or World Gym back in the day?
I trained maybe, that was at the original Gold's Gym. That
Mm,
was the first one that Joe Gold opened. I may have trained there once or twice. And then I may have trained at World Gym when Joe Gold opened that once. See, I had never cared to be part of the Venice Beach crowd. That didn't appeal to me at all.
hmm
I remember when I first decided or considered to move out to California, I would, because that's the only place you knew, go to Venice. And it just so happened Dan Howard, who was originally from Oklahoma, he was a manager there at Gold's Gym. And I looked around Venice and I said, man, it's too congested. This ain't for me. And the gym was not that good. I said, I can go back to Reds. That's where I won the Miss America. I said, I can train better there. He says, why don't you come? He was living in Huntington Beach. He says, why don't you come down and stay here in Huntington Beach? Stay a couple of days with me. So I went down, I looked, I said, this is kind of nice here. And he says, I'm in the process of opening up a gym down here. So I said, okay, I'll give that a try. Because he opened up a gym in Fountain Valley. Very, very nice gym. And I trained there for a couple of years too.
I was wondering, do bodybuilders from the down south train any differently from the West Coast bodybuilders?
Well, being that I never trained for any length of time like at Goals, I really couldn't say. But
hmm
I think everybody just basically trains. Everybody, there's no secret to all of this stuff. It's amazing when you're a kid and you read the magazines, and I believe this sincerely. It must be some secret that these guys getting that guy. I remember looking at pictures of Bill Pearl, and I said, I got to find out what his secret is. If I just know, if I could find out, I could get big and successful like him too. And I remember telling Bill, because Bill and I have been very good friends for many, many years. And I told him that story. He said, hell, there ain't no secret. He says, it just takes one thing, effort and consistency. And that's it. You just got to have that desire and stick with it.
I remember, I think one of my favorite magazines back in the day was Iron Man.
Always my favorite. Yeah.
Iron Man and muscular development, and because they had really good practical information on how to train, and diet and that sort of thing, compared to Joe Weider's magazine, which it seems like he was always trying to sell me something, right?
Well, very, very true. See, what was wonderful about Iron Man? If you remember, it only came out 6 times a year, every other month. And I got to know Perry Rader very well. He was a very sincere, down to earth guy. And he was getting older and he wanted to sell Iron Man. And I
Mm,
had an opportunity to buy Iron Man. Okay.
wow, wow.
And so I said, okay, I'm really interested. This was probably 1970. So I said, okay, he was coming to the AAU convention in New Orleans. Can you bring your books so I can look at it? How much do you want for it? I said, I would like to take this and let my accountant look at it. Now, hopefully we can work out a deal. He comes with a loose leaf binder. There was no accounting in it. It was all, he just ripped the pages out of it. So I'm thinking, how can, is this all you got? Yeah, this is it. So I take it to my accountant. He says, well, this is fine, but he says, this is no kind. I mean, I don't know how he kept his books because, see, in those days, Perry owned a printing business.
Mm.
Okay, so he ran his printing business, his little supplement business he had, and Iron Man all out of one checking account. He had one check, so you couldn't tell what was what. So I knew everybody in Lafayette. I go to the bank and I sit down. The guy looks at it. He says, I can't lend you money on this. This is nothing. So I never could buy it. Fortunately, many years later, back in the 80s, John Balick was able to get Iron Man, and he did the best he could. But by that time, it went well for a while. But in the magazines, as you know, the internet killed all the magazines.
Sure,
To
sure.
my knowledge, there's not even any magazine on the market anymore.
So back in the day, I mean, you've appeared in over, 100 different magazine covers. Back in the day, look at
That's
that.
interesting. That's an interesting picture right there because how that picture came about. A guy by the name of Ralph Countryman, who was a big AAU guy. Okay, he took that picture and he says, "Well," he came down to Lafayette. He says, "Do you have any good backgrounds?" At that time, they were building Interstate 10 highway through Louisiana. So that is a result of just them digging out piles of dirt. I said, "Well, look, that might be an interesting background." Went out there and said, "Yeah, this looks pretty good." So that's where the picture came from.
That's a great. That's see that these are great stories. Look at that. Another one. Studio shot.
Yeah, that too was taken by Cliff Swan, I think at Leo Stern's gym in San Diego.
Wow, look at that. And I love the size of these magazines. You could just stick them in your pocket, you know?
That picture there was taken outside of the in the back of Red Laurel's gym. That picture there, yeah.
How was it like to see yourself on the cover? Your family and friends. What did
Yeah,
they think?
in the beginning, to me, it's a funny story. Back in the days of, I think it was either Strength and Health or Muscular Development, they had what they called Man of the Month. This was I was in high school, and I'd say, man, it sure be nice to get my picture of Man of the Month. And I'd send it. Of course, it was just homemade photo. I'd send him in a photograph. I said, "Damn, it must not be very good. I can't even win Man of the Month." But I was always hypercritical of myself. So probably very few photos I was ever pleased with. Say, okay, yeah, I look pretty good here. So it really didn't it really didn't excite me that much to see my picture on the cover of a magazine.
Do you have a do you have an old stash of your memorabilia from back in the days from your career?
No, unfortunately, I've never been a collector. I never kept any of the trophies. Well, I take it back. Only trophy I ever kept, which meant a great deal to me, was the first NABA Universe contest I won back in 1969, because that was the same trophy that, once again, Steve Reeves won, John Grimmick won.
Right.
And after that, they got away from it. They went to the modern gigantic trophy. It didn't mean anything, but this was like a sterling silver trophy. It wasn't very big, but it meant something to me because it had the same pose of the John Grimmick, and it was in sterling silver. So it was a nice memento.
So Boyer, what was it like, posing on stage, going, toe to toe with your peers?
I always devoted a tremendous amount of time to presentation because of Red Laurel. He was an excellent poser. I remember every afternoon after I would work out, this is going back to when I was 17, 18. He had an old rub down table in the back of his gym, actually in the garage. And he would make me pose every day, practice, practice, practice. And then later on, when I started competing in the IFBB contest, I would devote, as the contest got a little closer, I would spend an hour and a half every day just practicing posing. And a lot of it has to do with the presentation, the transition of the pose. To me, that's the greatest weakness today. And again, just my opinion, many people might disagree with me. I don't see people in contests really know how to pose anymore. Basically, it revolves around one thing. Everybody tries to do a most muscular pose, which to me is when I see that, it always reminds me of a guy who's constipated.
Mm.
I mean, it looks like he's straining to use the bathroom, and it's an ugly pose. Nobody's, you don't see very many people doing a lat spread anymore or a double bicep, and there was a lot of great, and then the one thing that's entirely gone from people could always control the expression on their face. Now they're grimacing, they're sticking the tongue out. It doesn't appeal to anybody, as far as I'm concerned. But then again, I haven't been to contests in years, really don't have any desire to even go there anymore.
I was going to mention that I did notice that champs like yourself, you would smile. when you, I mean, you know, you're going through your motions and you're smiling, and you had those great back twisting poses.
The thing is this, I mean, you could be straining your ass off, okay? But you kept a nice, pleasant expression on your face. You know, now a guy that I worked with for years who could never get it was Casey Viator. Casey had probably he didn't have the structure, but he had every bit as good genetics as say Sergio Oliva. There's a difference, and I don't know why this happens. You can have people that have outstanding physiques. Let's say, for example, you could compare Frank Zane. Okay, Frank Zane always looked good standing, relaxed, or posing. He was very graceful. Okay, but when he did a pose, the muscles didn't explode. He just looked always up. Same way with Chris Dickerson. Now you take, for example, Casey Viator, just like myself. I never thought he looked that good standing relaxed. I was always hypercritical of myself. I didn't think I looked worth a damn standing relaxed. But when I hit a pose, everything happened. It changed. My arms looked like they were going to explode. Same way with Casey. But Casey never could control the expression on his face. It looked like his head was going to blow off. But he had plenty muscle.
So, you know, all you guys, you progress together, you know, from the 60s all the way to the 80s. You guys were just toe to toe, and you grew and developed, you know, together.
When Joe Weider decided to have the Masters Mr. Olympia, which was basically a contest that was created for the benefit of Lou Ferrigno.
Mm.
Lou, unfortunately, never had an opportunity to win the Olympia because he was smart. He happened to get the Hulk movie or TV series. He took advantage of that. It was very smart. But he still wanted to win the Mr. Olympia. So by that time, we were in our 40s. I think he was, I want to say 42, 43, something like that. So they were trying to get enough guys together. And in that area, you had a lot of good guys that were just in their 40s. You had, for example, Danny Padilla, to me, who had one of the best symmetrical physiques of anybody. I mean, Danny, without a doubt, had he taken bodybuilding seriously, and it would have been taller, he'd have won everything. Danny had, to me, a really pleasing physique. Okay, very, very nice guy. But you had Danny, you had Bill Grant, you had, of course, Chris Dickerson. There was a number of other guys that were very good. Now, I will have to say this, just from my own personal opinion. I was 48 at the time. To this day, I believe, and you probably never saw any pictures, that was the best shape I was ever in, was in 1994 when I entered that Miss Olympia. Now, I didn't expect to win because the contest was created for Lou. But then again, unexpectedly, you got Robby in there and you got me in there, and that created the dynamics. Robby ended up naturally winning. Now, second place, actually, Lou and I tied for second place. But he raised so much hell, they decided to give it second place to him, which is fine with me. I didn't care. The funny thing about that contest, I think the prize money was $25,000. So at the prejudging meeting of the contestants, I said, look, I said, Joe, I said, we all spent more than $25,000 preparing for this contest. I said, so I suggest this, whoever wins, give them all the $25,000. Oh, and Robby raised hell. No, you got to divide the money up. So after the contest was over with, I told Robby, I said, you just fucked yourself out of $15,000. You know, if you'd have kept quiet, you'd have got the whole $25,000.
Oh boy.
But I mean, it's, you know, I don't know why he was worried. He was in good shape. I personally think he was not the best that day, but that's just my opinion.
How long were you on a layoff before that contest?
Oh, no layoff. I was always, I continued to train. So there was really nothing more for me to do other than up my dose of, anabolic steroids and growth hormone. Other than that, I'd always kept myself in good shape. The funny thing about that, you probably never saw it, but there was a good documentary made called Stand Tall. of that 1994 Masters Mr. Olympia. And it's funny how that came about, because once the thing was over with, then the guy, Mark Nally, was the one who produced it and everything. He says, I really don't have anything. I said, what do you mean? He says, I need a storyline. He says, when they created Pumping Iron, they had a rival between Lou and Arnold. He said, I need something. He says, would you be willing to do it? He said, I need a rival for Lou. I said, well, okay. Because this was at least 6 or 8 months after the contest was over with. So we had to go back and recreate everything you see in that movie of me training. That was done way after the contest was over. So every dialogue in the movie, I got to keep thinking, okay, I got to talk like the contest is coming up. But it was an enjoyable movie, and it came out pretty well. I think it even won a couple of awards in these independent documentary movies.
Now, what was it like working with Joe Weider?
I always got along exceptionally well with Joe Weider. I was the only one that I know of. I never had a single contract with Joe Weider. I never took a paycheck. Everything we ever did was just on a handshake. So everybody talks about, oh, Joe Weider took advantage of people, and that's not true. The thing is this, and I went to see Joe 3 days before he passed away, when he was in the hospital. And they always tell you the last thing to go before you pass away, you can still hear. So I'm not sure if he was in a coma or what. He was all hooked up to different kind of apparatus. And I said, Joe, I just want to thank you for giving me the opportunity. That's always, and you gave me an opportunity. What I did with that was up to me. But you gave me the opportunity and helped me, create myself. And I could tell, but the eye fluttering of his eye, he could hear me. So that meant a lot to me, to be able to express my thankfulness to him. That's all I really wanted to do. But we did a lot of business together. I mean, I supplied him with some home equipment for his gym, even as he had a house in Las Vegas. I supplied that, and we worked back and forth. And I did a lot of promotions for him. And he was nice enough to give me at certain times free ads in the magazine. But everybody, the bodybuilders, was jealous, and they expected, because he was wealthy, they wanted something from him. Well, he gave them an opportunity, gave them exposure in the magazines. What you do with that is up to you. One thing I remember is he had something called an arm blaster. It was a
Right.
thing that, okay. Well, so I'm going to take a picture of that, and it was all apart. I said, Joe, how do you put this on? So I have no idea. It was his product, but he said, look, I think the photographer and I finally figured out how to set the thing on you so you can do the exercise for the photograph. Yeah.
Right. But back in the day, did you have like anyone that represented you, like an agent or someone that like negotiated, fees for you, how you would get paid and that sort of thing?
No, I did everything myself. I never ever had an agent. In other words, I negotiated every, I guess you would say, agreement, whether it was written or just with a handshake, but I did it myself. Now, I know maybe later on, Arnold and some of those other guys had agents, but I never had anything like that. I always did it myself. I just was out there hustling all the time. I mean, it was nothing for me to go back and forth to Europe for an exhibition. And what got me was this. I mean, you hear some of these guys now, well, I don't have a sponsor. I can't afford to train for a contest. Hell, back in nobody had sponsors, but you somehow or another, you had the money. You got yourself to the contest and you competed. And in those days, there was no money involved in it at all. Even back in I think in the Mr. Olympia, the most they had at that time was like when Frank Zane was winning, was maybe $20,000. It's not like the $400,000 today, you see. And really, when you think about it, $400,000 is nothing compared to what you make if you win a professional golf tournament. You win millions of dollars. I always laugh at the guys today. I said, all that you're getting paid for. We did all that same thing and more for free because we enjoyed it. We loved it.
So did you see the film Pumping Iron? What did you think
Yeah.
of it? If you did, what did you think of it?
Well, I thought it was okay. I thought it was, well, at the time it was way ahead of it, of everything. Well, it was actually, there's two things that contributed to the fitness explosion in the United States and worldwide. One of them was the movie Pumping Iron, because that was the first thing that introduced the general public to the gym, and people became fascinated with it. The second thing that was, and just as important was that, was the introduction of Nautilus equipment by Arthur Jones. You go back there, you look when Pumping Iron came out, and that was probably what, around, I want to say 75, 76. Arthur had been around with Arthur Jones with Nautilus for a while, and everybody, because he sold a bill of goods, kind of like Joe Weider. Okay, Joe Weider was, you mentioned earlier, Joe was always trying to sell something, and that's all it was. His magazine was a catalog to sell his products. Okay, well, Arthur was even a better promoter. I will say this: Arthur Jones was probably the greatest promoter ever since P.T. Barnum.
Mm.
He could, and fortunately, once again, just happened to be at the right time with Vic Tanny, Jack LaLanne, Joe Gold. I have I met, interesting story about Arthur. I met, I didn't know him who he was at the time, but I became aware of Arthur Jones when I was 9 years old. See, living in Louisiana, you didn't have interstate highways, you just had Highway 90. So when we got a vacation as a little kid, we would always go to Florida. We had to go down Highway 90 from Lake Charles to get to Florida. Well, going down that highway, you had to go through Slidell, Louisiana. Just so happens, Arthur had a reptile farm. So you get a kid about 8 or 9 years old, you're being in the car for maybe an hour, 2 hours. Tell you, hey, Dad, I got to get out. Let's do something. So we'd stop at that reptile farm. And Arthur had a very distinct voice. And I'd get down and look at, and he also had the biggest crocodile in the world at that time down there. And I'm looking at this thing, it actually looked like a modern day monster. The damn thing was so big. I mean, they had photographs of it, and the circumference around the belly of that crocodile was 9 feet. To give you an idea how
Oh
big
my
it was.
goodness.
It never moved. I thought it was dead. It was just laying there. But anyway, that years ago, okay, so I never thought about it, but and then he had a movie on TV years ago called Wild Cargo, and I would watch that, but I never made the connection, although I remembered the voice. So in 1969, right after I won the Mr. America, I get a phone call one day. This is Arthur Jones. He says, I got an exercise machine. We'll build lats on a garden rake. Are you interested? Yeah, I thought this guy was a crackpot, you know. I said, yeah, I'm interested. He says, well, he says, Bill Pearl gave me your phone number. What had happened, he wanted Bill to come down and see this machine. Bill had known Arthur for many years, okay? Because actually Arthur made a movie one time with Bill Pearl in it. It never went anywhere, but never was released. But anyway, so Bill called and says, look, he says, boy, I don't want to go down there. He says, go down there. It's close. Louisiana's closer to Florida than I am. Arthur was living in Lake Helen, Florida. So I go down there, and immediately when I hear his voice and I see him in person, I make a connection. I'm thinking, damn, this is the same guy I knew. They had the reptile farm in Slidell, Louisiana. And that's how we became friends. I mean, the very first Nautilus machine, I was there when he prototyped that on the front porch of his house. So that was before, they wouldn't even call it Nautilus in those days. They didn't have the spiral cam. It just had, actually it looked more like a piece of farm equipment. And the way they would get the resistance to vary, they had a 50-pound plate with hooks welded on 4 corners of it. And they had chains attached to it. So in a pullover machine, as you lifted the weight up, it created a curve because it would get heavier as the chains came up off the floor. And then his son Gary was the one that suggested the spiral camp, and that's how it got started. And then Arthur also, being an extremely good promoter, his philosophy was, you only got to do one set of this exercise. The routine won't take more than 20 minutes. Do that 3 times a week. Well, that was a great promotion for health clubs. Wow, we get volumes of people in and out. They don't have to spend. So people bought that hook, line, and sinker. And the train go to failure. Well, that didn't last long because it was too painful. People don't like to be in pain, But he promoted. He did a great job. Nautilus did exceptionally well in the beginning. But you got to remember, other than Universal, which was started by Harold Zinkin, there wasn't any other exercise equipment on the market.
So Boyer, what was it like the experience making the training tapes for ESPN, like with Frank Zane and Sean Ray?
Well, you got to remember now, Frank was only a guest. Okay, Sean Ray and I were the 2 hosts of that show. Okay, that was one of the best times I ever had. We had that show we ran it for 5 seasons. Okay, it was on ESPN. The only problem we had with that show, because we did everything. Sean, the producer, would show up the day of when we started, and he would be gone. The last show, we did 40 shows in 10 days. 10 days straight, okay? We're on set from 7 in the morning to at least 7 at night. Okay, how that got to, originally, I was asked to be a guest one time and also supplied all the equipment for that show. We had Body Masters equipment there. But it started out with the show Body Shapers, okay? John tried to produce that. And I kept telling him, I said, John, you need a bodybuilding show. So that's when he came up with Flex Magazine Workout. What we would do, we would have that show shortly after the Mr. Olympia contest. So everybody was always in good shape. We had all the guys lined up, and at that time, the Miss Olympia was held at the same time. So we'd have some of the girls on as well. But if we could have just got a good time slot, it would have been wildly popular. But a show would come on at like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. So the viewership was very, very limited. But that was one of the things I enjoyed the most, because I felt like we were really helping people out. We could express our knowledge about bodybuilding, why you do this particular exercise this way. Now, Sean and I worked extremely well together, but he did, our exercise philosophy was entirely different. His was, he used a lot of momentum and everything, where I didn't. I like to do full range of motions, but everything very strict and slow. But obviously, both worked. And so that's what I really enjoyed it. I had hoped. Well, I even went to up to, I'm trying to think where it was at, where ESPN was, their corporate office was at, trying to convince them we could do more. We could make the show better. But I was never able to do that. My idea originally was, when I went to work for Arthur Jones a second time, this was in the early 80s, 83, 84. The thing that convinced me to go back to work for him at the time, he had 100,000 square foot production studio with 7 different studios. So he could literally film 7 different studios, 24 hours a day. He had more camera equipment and editing and everything else than ABC, CBS, and NBC at the time.
Wow.
He was set up. The one thing he didn't have, he would have been far ahead of everybody. He didn't have cable. He had the production, didn't have cable. So the only one at that time had cable was Ted Turner. Before, that was before CNN, okay? Later on, it became CNN. So Arthur and I went to see Ted Turner. And Arthur offered him a deal. He says, I'll provide you with all the production you want, no charge. But what you got to do is you got to run Nautilus commercials 24 hours a day, a little episode. To me, it was a win-win situation, but Ted Turner turned it down.
Mm.
Now, if Arthur would have been able to get a cable network, he would have become bigger than Fox News because he was ultra conservative, but it just never worked out. But I was smart enough to see at that time, I didn't care about the equipment, but I wanted to be able to get in on that cable network. If it would, I could have become a multi-millionaire off of it had it worked out, but it didn't. I think he had in his mind, but he didn't know how to go about it. He was going to try and create, to some degree. Do you recall the Colorado experiment that he did with Casey Viator?
I do.
Okay. Well, that he claimed that was successful. I don't say it accomplished anything. What he had to do, Casey had already won the Mr. America contest. And Arthur, while he took credit for it, didn't help Casey improve that much. But the year before, he had already placed third at 18, and he was good enough to win. So then you go back to when he won, in 1971. First thing he did the next year, probably had it continued as it normally had in the past, Ken Waller would have won. Somehow or other, because Arthur was close friends with John Turpak, Bob Hoffman, he got Ken Waller declared a professional, so he couldn't compete in the Mr. America. Okay, so that eliminated Casey's competition. It was a shoo-in for Casey to win. But you see, and Casey was the kind of guy, if he would have lifted a sack of rocks, he would have improved. Didn't matter what he did, because even his training was never precise, but he was just so brutally strong and responded to anything. So he won, but so then he wanted to create this situation where Casey, for whatever reason, I'd lost contact with him by then. He had quit training for a while. Then he got in an accident. He lost part of his finger, got cut off. I think that was happening while he was working for Arthur. So they got him down, they started him, they got him down to 155 pounds. So he was like a shadow of himself. So Arthur was convinced through his training methods that he could rebuild Casey, which he did, He went from, say, 155 or whatever it was pounds back to over 200 pounds, supposedly in 30 days, which is impossible. Now all he did, it was impressive, but all he did was regain his former body weight. It wasn't like adding 50 pounds of muscle. He had muscle memory. He was just regaining. And all he did was he worked out and they stuffed him with food. So all he was just were recovering. But while they touted that as a great promotion for Nautilus, I think it kind of fell flat. They didn't really get off there. It didn't prove anything, because even when he regained all that weight, he wasn't anywhere close to what he looked like when he won the Mr. America contest. So I think back when I went down there, Arthur was going to attempt to do the same thing with me, because he had me stop training for 3 months. And then he had my diet go down to, I think maybe 1,000 calories a day. So you lose size, So then he starts me back on the Nautilus thing 3 times a week. And I was going through this workout, and it would probably only last about 15 minutes. But you just move through one exercise as fast as it, and that's not the way I train. I kept telling Arthur, I said, I can make good on this if you let me train the way. You got to remember, Arthur, I'd already won the Mr. America. I had won the Mr. World multiple times. The Mr. Universe, I know what the hell I'm doing, Oh no, you got to train like this. So as a result, I got used to the machines, and I probably got a little bit stronger, but I never gained any weight. I got a little. So what happened after that, he eventually lost interest in it because it wasn't working. So he couldn't do anything with it. So then at that time, I got to figure out, okay, well, I got to figure out something to do. I'm still down here. He's paying me well. So that's when we got involved in the Nautilus home equipment. And I happen to know, I'm sure you remember a magazine called Sharper Image Magazine. That was a fantastic mail order magazine. So I happen to know Richard Tallheimer, who owned the magazine. I said, Richard, I got a hot, and Nautilus was very big. I said, I got a hot exercise machine you'll do well with. So we picked him up, I think, somewhere in Tampa, flew back, we made a deal. At that time, all the machines were being made in Taiwan. So we'd ship them in, and I had a staff of people that worked with me. We were going gangbusters with it. I think I sold, if I remember correctly, like it was quite a few years ago. I think maybe it was 3 or 4 months we'd sold about, I want to say, about $4 million worth of machines. And that was a lot in those days because it wasn't inexpensive. It was I think the thing sold for about $450 a piece. That's a lot in those days. So then a guy comes along who was a general manager, Ed Farnham, says, well, I got to deal with Sears. I said, if you do Sears, that's going to mess everything up. I said, let's stick with this for a while. Because I had contacted Neiman Marcus. And I said, okay, I talked to the people at Neiman Marcus. They said, it's a great idea. We'll put it in the Neiman Marcus Christmas catalog. I said, okay, because I had this idea. I'd chrome plate the machine. All upholstery would be in mink. Okay, I didn't give a damn if we sold one of them. We just wanted to get it into the magazines. And so anyway, this guy goes behind, makes a deal with Sears. And so Arthur says, oh, we got to go with Sears. I said, don't do that. He says, well, Sears has got 25 million credit card holders. He says, how many credit card holders Neiman Marcus has? So I called him, well, we got 9 million. I said, doesn't matter. I said, to spend that kind of money with Sears, if you spend $450, those guys are going to use that to buy a refrigerator or a stove. They ain't gonna buy an exercise machine. I said, let's go with Neiman Marcus first. You can always go down to Sears later. Well, they didn't listen to me. They went with Sears, and that's when Arthur and I had a falling out in 1984, and that's when I decided, okay, I'm out of here. I left. But I mean, had it listened to me, I think it would, and I enjoyed it because I like marketing. But he wanted it done his way, and as a result of it, it never went anywhere.
But I read and heard stories about some of the bodybuilders from back in the day. Some of the jobs they did, they were either like actors or they were bouncers or they, other types of shenanigans. But you had higher aspirations. You had your supplement line. I understand that you owned some supplement stores, some nutrition stores.
I had three nutrition stores at one time in Louisiana. Yes.
So you've always been an entrepreneur, businessman.
The thing is this. I mean, I was very fortunate that I was able to go to college, and also the fact that that's some of the original Body Masterpieces that we produced. But I was fortunate enough to go to have a degree, get a degree in college, and although I never really used it in anything, I applied it to what I learned, and try to do something in business. Yeah.
So here we are today. How are we keeping ourselves in shape these days? Our longevity, keeping healthy as we're getting older. What's that look like for you?
I tell you, I ask that self every morning because I still get up. I go to the gym at 5 o'clock every morning. But as you get older, the sad thing about the thing that bothers me the most as you get older, and it for some reason doesn't hit a person till I would say in their mid 50s, because I always believed that the time I could always keep myself in excellent shape, but it started going downhill. And then when you get to a certain age, it really starts hitting you about 70 pretty hard. You get something, it happens to everybody. you get sarcopenia, which is nothing you could do. In other words, no matter how hard you train, your muscles just continually go away. And if you're not careful, you create more fat. So that's why I pay more attention to my diet today. But unfortunately, like at 75 now, I train as hard as I can. I can't lift the same amount of weight as I did naturally.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't get to pumping the muscle anymore either. That's what's so frustrating to me. I can remember years ago when I would work out, particularly work back. Your back would get so pumped, you'd have a hard time getting your t-shirt off. I don't feel that anymore. I really miss that.
Mm-hmm.
So you wonder, at 75, I wonder many times, okay. And unfortunately, just within the past year or so, Chris Dickerson passed away.
Mm-hmm.
Dave Draper passed away. When I think back at that particular era of time, basically you got Frank Zane and myself, as far as I know, about the only two people left. Mike passed away, God, it's been probably 20 years ago.
Right. So do you have any injuries that you have to deal with these days?
Well, because of all of the years of heavy bench pressing that I did, I have a shoulder that bothers me quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Simply because everything on this left shoulder is just bone on bone. Now, I could go and have it fixed, but I'm going to have a total shoulder replacement. And I'm not quite bad enough yet to have that done. Other than that, I'm okay.
Some of my buddies at the gym, we work out maybe 2 or 3 times a week. We're all getting older, just trying to stay in some type of decent shape. But why is it, do you think, that as we get older, we gain so much weight as we get older?
Well, one, you're probably not as active.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, you got to remember your metabolism slows down a lot too. It's just a combination of everything as you get older.
Right.
You find me the youth pill, I'll be the first in line to pay you for it,
So what advice would you give us guys over 40 and 50 that want to start a weight training program, doing it sensibly?
The one advice that I'd give everybody, regardless of age, if you're just starting out, could be a teenager to an adult, the one word to me that's a secret to life, doesn't matter if it's bodybuilding or anything, that everybody seems to be afraid of, is the word effort. You never accomplish anything without putting some effort into it. I don't care if it's an invention or if it's a stock market, you got to put forth effort. And it's the same way with training. You got to get up. I mean, it doesn't matter if you got the latest exercise equipment available or you're training in a shed with a sack of rocks. If you got enthusiasm and effort. I can remember when I first started training at this first little gym when it was sold out, then it became a health studio. Okay. Well, they didn't really want bodybuilders in there. So they relented. They put out a squat rack and an Olympic set outside. And that's all we had. We trained outside in the cold, but we had effort. We had enthusiasm. So it didn't matter if it was cold or not. We trained outside because it didn't stop us. You got to have that enthusiasm and effort to accomplish anything. That's my secret, if that's a secret.
Well, Boyer, that's about all the questions I have for you today, and I appreciate you joining us today. Is there anything that we didn't cover? Anything final words that you'd like to say?
No, I think you did a very good job. You brought up pictures and stuff I'd long forgot about, so that was interesting seeing that. But I really enjoyed it, and I enjoyed the interview with you. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Boyer. Thanks for joining us today.
Have a great day, Dan.
Thank you, Boyer. Well, thank you for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please leave a like, a comment, subscribe, and share. I would appreciate it. And until the next time, keep training and chasing the dream.